الشيطان الرجيم ألم تر إلى الذين أوتوا نصيبا من الكتاب يدعون إلى كتاب الله ليحكم بينهم ثم يتولى فريق منهم وهم معرضون ذلك بأنهم قالوا لن تمسنا النار إلا أياما معدودات وغرهم في دينهم ما كانوا يفترون فكيف إذا جمعناهم ليوم لا ريب فيه ووفيت كل نفس ما كسبت وهم لا يظلمون قل اللهم مالك الملك تؤتي الملك من تشاء وتنزع الملك ممن تشاء وتعز من تشاء وتذل من تشاء بيدك الخير إنك على كل شيء قدير تولج الليل في النهار وتولج النهار في الليل وتخرج الحي من الميت وتخرج الميت من الحي وترزق من تشاء بغير حساب لا يتخذ المؤمنون الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين ومن يفعل ذلك فليس من الله في شيء إلا أن تتقوا منهم تقات ويحذركم الله نفسه وإلى الله المصير قل إن تخفوا ما في صدوركم أو تبدوه يعلمه الله ويعلم ما في السماوات وما في الأرض والله على كل شيء قدير يوم تجد كل نفس ما عملت من خير محضرا وما عملت من سوء تود لو أن بينها وبينه أمدا بعيدا ويحذركم الله نفسه والله رؤوف بالعباد. The English rendering of what I have recited is as follows. Hast thou not seen those who have been given their portion of the book? They are called to the book of Allah that it may judge between them, but a party of them turn away in aversion. That is because they say, the fire shall not touch us except for a limited number of days, and what they used to forge has deceived them regarding their religion. How will it be with them when we will gather them together on the day about which there is no doubt, and when every soul shall be paid in full what it has earned, and they shall not be wronged? Say, O Allah, Lord of sovereignty, Thou givest sovereignty to whomsoever Thou pleasest, and Thou takest away sovereignty from whomsoever Thou pleasest. Thou exaltest whomsoever Thou pleasest, and Thou abasest whomsoever Thou pleasest. In Thy hand is all good. Thou surely hast power to do all things. Thou makest the night pass into the day, and makest the day pass into the night, and Thou bringest forth the living from the dead, and bringest forth the dead from the living, and Thou givest to whomsoever Thou pleasest without measure. Let not the believers take disbelievers for friends in preference to believers, and whoever does that has no connection with Allah except that you guard yourselves fully against them. And Allah cautions you against His punishment, and to Allah is the returning. Say, whether you hide what is in your breasts or reveal it, Allah knows it, and He knows He knows whatever is in the heavens and whatever is in the earth, and Allah has power to do all things. Beware of the day when every soul shall find itself confronted with all the good it has done and all the evil it has done. It will wish there were a great distance between it and the evil, and Allah cautions you against His punishment, and Allah is most compassionate to His servants. Of these verses, the first two verses we have already attended previously in the session, but two minor points were left undiscussed, so I have taken them away again once again. Alam tara ila allazina utu nasiban min al-kitabe. I told you that nasiban min al-kitabe, that portion of the book, refers to earlier books as having not been the complete book which was promised to every prophet, and that promise got fulfilled in the form of the Holy Quran. So when we read later on in the verse, Yud'una ila kitabillahi liyakuma bainahum, they're called to the book of God. Here the book refers to the Holy Quran. But some of the commentators have preferred to understand it slightly differently. They believe that Yud'una ila kitabillahi refers to the earlier books, the Old Testament and the New Testament. And they were called to follow their own books. As previously also we have met a similar verse in which their attention is drawn to follow their own book, if not the Holy Quran. And still they turn away and don't listen to this admonishment. This is possible that this verse may carry both meanings, and you have to look at it from two different angles. Then you understand that simultaneously both these meanings are possible. Utu nasibam min al-kitabe is the key to this. If you take this to mean that there were the scholars of the time when these verses were revealed had not the possession of the entire book which was revealed to them themselves. They were divided between themselves, and some of them stuck to some verses and their interpretation of those verses, and some others belonging to other factions emphasized on some other verses. So in reality, they themselves had got divided through the agency of the same book which came to unite them. Some believed in some portions and some in others, although they did not deny the authenticity of other portions, but they gave distorted meanings to others. So in the nutshell, in the sum total, they were left only with a portion thereof and not the entire book. So the Holy Prophet is enjoined upon Allah to point out to them to believe in the whole book, not in portions. Why don't they read the rest of it? Now this, if you look at it from this angle, then it becomes a very valid interpretation, and it is well sustained and supported by other verses of the Holy Quran, which repeatedly refer to Jews as having believed in parts thereof and hiding parts thereof, other parts thereof. They read out a portion and hide another portion. So by doing so, in reality, they prove that they only believe in a portion of the book and not in the entire book. And so they are the people who can be referred to as Utu Nasiba min al-Kitabe. Although the whole book was meant for them, but they got satisfied only with a portion and started fighting with each other. Now this can happen, and this has happened in this age to some Muslims as well, unfortunately. Some emphasize out of all proportion a certain meaning attributed to one verse of God, and some others give emphasis to another verse of the Holy Quran out of all proportion, with the result that the true meaning is lost. And those who say, for instance, Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam was Noor, they present only those verses which deal with this subject of Noor. And those who believe that he was not a Noor in that sense, but he was a Bashar, that is a man, they go on repeating day in and day out the verse, قُلْ إِنَّمَا أَنَا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُكُمْ يُوحَى إِلَيَّ أَنَّمَا إِلَٰهُكُمْ إِلَٰهٌ وَاحِدٌ. So if you pass by their mosques, you can immediately pinpoint which sect they belong to. From the Wahhabi mosques and from the Deobandi mosques, you hear most often than not these verses which tell of the human character of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. قُلْ إِنَّمَا أَنَا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُكُمْ. And in the other mosques, they go on reciting the other verse. And again, they do the same thing to us. In their sermons, in their repeated sessions of whatever nature they be, they recite Ayat Khatam al-Nabiyyin, but you will never hear them recite وَمَنْ يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَالرَّسُولَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ. They only emphasize the verse Khatam al-Nabiyyin, meaning thereby that no sort of prophet, even a subordinate prophet to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, can ever come. But that verse deals with this subject directly and unambiguously, and makes a categorical statement that all those who follow Hazrat Rasul Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam will be treated favorably by Allah, will be rewarded amply, and will join the group of those who have been earlier favored by Allah, like prophets, Siddiq, Shaheed and Saleh. So why they leave that out? That shows they themselves are now doing the same thing to the Holy Quran which earlier people did to the earlier books. So Nasiba min al-Kitabe may also mean to refer to the earlier books, and Al-Kitab with reference to that would mean their earlier total book, the entire book. And if it is applied to the Muslims, then the similar ratio or relationship would be held with in these two verses in application to Muslims. Then the Holy Quran would be meant in the first part as well as in the second part. Nasiba min al-Kitabi would mean those Muslims who, despite the fact that the whole and complete book was given to them, got satisfied with only a portion thereof and left the other out, ignored the other portion of the book. So they are called to the entire book, to the entire teaching of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ قَالُوا لَن تَمَسَّنَا النَّارُ إِلَّا أَيَّامٌ مَعْدُودَاتٍ. This is their conduct, their attitude, because they think that fire will not touch them, but only for a few days. Now, similar views, although totally unfounded, have been adopted by some Muslim sects, particularly those who believe in Peer, Faqir, etc., that sort of thing. They feel that the holy men of Islam have the power to save them from the punishment of hell, and even if they go on committing sins all their lives, if they follow a holy man and please him here on earth, then he will be able to save them from the punishment of fire in the hereafter. And also they believe that the fire will touch everybody, but only briefly. And they draw this inference from a verse of the Holy Quran which has a completely different message than as understood by this. But altogether, in view of this verse and in view of other verses, if you look at some sects of Muslims or some, not strictly speaking sects, but some groups belonging to various sects, they do believe that they can be saved the punishment of hell if they follow some holy saint to a degree that they follow not his holiness, but only they get attached and associated to him. If they are become the followers of some Pir, only that would suffice them, and then the major punishment of the fire will be spared them. So when people become distorted later on, when they go a long distance from the original source of light, then these things do happen. It was for the Muslims to draw their lessons from the past history as has been contained in the Holy Quran and expressed so clearly. But unfortunately, those who don't want to take a lesson, they never do. وَغَرَّهُمْ فِي دِينِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَفْتَرُونَ. Another reason is given which is responsible for this distorted and unnatural behavior. وَغَرَّهُمْ فِي دِينِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَفْتَرُونَ. They have started believing in the forgery they themselves are responsible for. For a forgery for which they were themselves responsible, they ultimately started believing in that. And despite the fact that Allah had never told them that they will be punished only for a few days, they first forged verses like this or started concocting stories about it. And then after a while they started believing in those forgeries which they themselves were responsible, for which they themselves were responsible. Now this is a point which belongs to human psyche. It does happen. If somebody goes on telling lies, makes it a habit, sometimes he himself is convinced of those lies so much, unwittingly, unknowingly, he really believes that that story which he himself has concocted is true. So he picks up fights in defense of his stories and quarrels with others and say, no, this is what happened. And when you tell a liar of this nature a liar, then he takes exception to this. He said, call me anything but a liar, That is something which I never did. So I have seen such liars. One of them once discussed the many matters with me, and in a short spell of time he lied 20, 24 times, that sort of thing, in a very short spell of time. Lied so boldly and naturally, it came, like a natural flow of spring. And at the end he said, look here, look at that enemy of mine. Once he called me a liar. And I told him, look here, I will tolerate anything but this. Liar I am not. So people, you must have also met such people who do this, were carried away by their lies. Similarly, the Maulvis are doing it to us nowadays. They first completely concoct stories which are totally without foundation, absolutely baseless. Then they go on telling these lies, and then they get involved in them so seriously that they agitate and move the people to pressurize the government to accept their demands, and they actually behave as if they have started believing in them. And sometimes they throw challenges to Ahmadis for mubahala, for those forgeries they themselves had made. So this is a beautiful book, most wonderful book, which doesn't leave any, any shadow of, relevant factors. however slight they may be. So it points out to a phenomenon which is universal, but which is not generally observed by people. And because the Holy Quran is not the work of a man, so Allah knows these things in the very depths of which are responsible for our motivations, in the very depths of our nature. So He brings them to surface. فكيف إذا جمعناهم ليوم لا ريب فيه ووفيت كل نفس ما كسبت وهم لا يظلمون. How will it be with them when we will gather them together on the day about which there is no doubt, and when every soul shall be paid in full what it has earned, and they shall not be wronged. Now let me discuss the meanings of some important words here. Well, every word is important, of course, but I mean some words which are slightly more difficult to understand or to translate. They have to be brought to special focus of attention. You know, for kaifa iza jamanahum liyawmin la rayba fihi. This is an expression which requires an answer. How will it be when this happens? So the commentators all say the word kaifa generally contains a hidden statement which is a part of the statement but which is not shown in so many words. So many people attribute different possible answers to this. For kaifa iza jamanahum may mean that how shall they find themselves, that is to say, how defenseless they would be. So that is also a possible statement underlying the word kaifa. It could also mean how surprised they would be who do not believe in such a thing. They have rejected the possibility of a day of resurrection and the day of reckoning. So what would be their state of mind when they find themselves involved right in such a thing? فَكَيْفَ إِذَا جَمَعْنَاهُمْ لِيَوْمٍ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. How will they be recompensed and how will they be punished? So it may apply to two different types of people. Those who are the criminals, for them kaifa would indicate how they will be punished. That would be the day for them to be really afraid, close to the time of their punishment. But kaifa, in that sense, applied to the doers of good deed, would have a connotation of glad tidings about it. So there are so many such expressions used in the Holy Quran which say a portion unsaid, which leave a portion unsaid, with the result that the meaning can be enlarged from various points of view. Looking at it from various angles, new meanings would appear before you. Now, the most important thing about this verse which is to be decided is whether this applies to this world or to the world hereafter, or is it possible for this verse to apply to both these situations simultaneously? Most of the commentators, that is to say classical commentators, take this verse to mean to mean something which is going to happen in the hereafter after we pass away and reappear in the second life, whatever the nature be. And they believe that this is only, this refers only to the day of resurrection and the day of reckoning, and when people, all the people will be brought together. Now, similar verses have passed before in the same verse, same surah, and I established that those verses had dual application, simultaneous application to a remote future event of the day of reckoning, as well as what was promised to the Muslims in this world, and also what was promised to the non-believers. Previously, we have already studied two such verses, in which one particularly applied to the Muslims and discussed the glad tidings of the ultimate total victory of Islam over the rest of the religions. And the other, which possessed the word hush, that mainly dealt with the criminals and how they will be brought to justice. And both these verses could also mean, at the same time, to refer to a remote future event of the hereafter. And they are interconnected, those two meanings. One stands the proof for the other's validity. If that verse is taken to mean to indicate the events of this world, and that prophecy is fulfilled to the letter, completely, then the other meaning contained by the same verse also have much greater authority, and we can believe in that other connotation also with much greater surety than previously. Similarly, this verse applies not only to the hereafter, but also to the events here on this earth. What events? That events are explained in the following verses. And when you read the following verses, then you will understand that its first application is to the here, not to the hereafter. Despite the fact that some verses have the possibility of applications to this world and the future world, yet you have preferences. Some verses initially, in the first place, apply to the hereafter, and only through interpretation their application can be extended to this world. And some verses have the first application to events here, and through inference and extension of their meaning, you may take them to apply to the future world that is to be. In this case, I can establish this on the strength of the following verses, that initially this event which has been described here is an event of this world, here, not the hereafter, but by implication also that would be true. How that would be, I will discuss that after I have gone through some comments of the earlier commentators and bring you up to date to what they have been telling us. Imam Razi says, for kafa here, as already I have discussed, it has an implied meaning, more than one implied meaning. He says it perhaps means the enemies of Islam think otherwise as to what is the nature of Islam and what's going to happen to them and the Muslims, etc. And on the day of judgment, this mistaken notion will be clarified. And then kafa means what would be their state when they know the reality and the truth and they see it eye to eye. Imam Razi has also made a very interesting, a delicate point about the usage of the letter lam, that is la, jamanahum li yawmin. How shall they find themselves when we gather them? We generally translate it on the day. Imam Razi points out that lam here has a special significance. Le literally means for the reason, for what reason. So he says it indicates that we will gather them for a purpose. Le yomin, the word lam indicates that they will be collected and gathered for a very special purpose. So the work is the word missing according to Imam Razi. We will gather them for the work of a day, for a task to which we will bring them, you know. Now, most interestingly, this verse has been made the subject of a debate. And as I demonstrated earlier, sometimes even a single statement of the Holy Quran is taken to mean exactly the opposite things. And two different types of scholars go on fighting with each other as to what really is meant by a particular verse. And their interpretations are so far removed from each other that there is a paradoxical situation. If one is right, the other has to be wrong. And they can't be held to be good together at one and the same time. Like the previous one, they could mean both. And we can prove it that there is no harm. They could live simultaneously, hand in hand with each other. But here, in the second part of this verse, a debate has been raised by various scholars. Some have attempted to prove that this verse positively proves that the hell would be eternal. How? That's very surprising, but they think that it's very clear to them, this verse proves that the hell is going to be eternal. And the others say, look here, it does refer to hell, but it proves that hell will not be eternal, but only transient. So what can one do about it? If the same verse is taken to mean two different contradicting statements, then the only solution is to refer to the Prophet or to refer to the other books. So as far as the Prophet is concerned, one has to search for various statements of the Holy Prophet regarding this subject. So any interpretation which is contradictory to his interpretation would fall automatically and would be invalidated. So in this regard, we'll search for such a statement of the Holy Prophet and decide which party was in the right and which was on the wrong. But let me first apprise you of their various styles of argument. According to Imam Razi, those who believe in the everlasting hell stress the point that wuffiyat kullu nafsin ma kasabat is a very stern statement where it says that whoever has earned some evil will be fully paid in the fullest terms. So they say when they are fully paid for the evil they have committed, that means there is no end to it. How the meaning? I mean, even Imam Razi fails to understand. Later on, he discusses it's not possible for us to understand what they mean. But there are some scholars of standing who have taken this view. Why? Because first they get attached to their own view and give a secondary relevance to the verses of the Holy Quran after having formed an opinion. So whenever opinionated scholars come to be born in any religion, then this is what they begin to do to the scriptures. They have a formed opinion, everything must follow their opinion. So every verse that would come their way, it has to be distorted to a degree that it begins to support, or seemingly it begins to support their viewpoint. Now, it's a very interesting counter argument has been developed by the opposing group, and they say that because even believers commit sometimes mistakes, advertently or inadvertently, but they do commit sins. So how can they be paid full? According to them, there are only two possible ways to be paid in full coins, in full terms. First, because they have also committed good deeds, they have done good deeds. That is the issue involved, you know. Wufiyat kullu nafsim bima kasabat. Everybody will be paid in the full whatever he has earned. So they say they have earned favors of Allah as well by doing good deeds. So if they are only relegated to an eternal hell, then where shall those favors go? So surprisingly, they close their eyes to the fact that even non-Muslims can do the same. To do good deeds is not a monopoly of the Muslims only. The Holy Quran is so clear on this subject that no man, unless he closes his eyes to the Holy Quran, can ever hold a view that non-Muslims will not be able to, are never able to do good deeds. And again, that is contradicted by Hazrat Rasul Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam very specifically. And he himself quotes non-Muslims having done good deeds. The Holy Quran does so, how couldn't he? But anyway, these scholars are the product of medieval times. At that time, they had become conquerors of a large part of the world, and they had acquired a sovereign attitude. There, whatever they could dictate would be carried. They were the sovereigns, as if the Holy Quran was no longer the sovereign, and they could take it to mean anything, and that meaning would be imposed, even upon the Muslims, not to mention the non-Muslims. So gradually, the non-Muslims were shouldered out from everything good, and categorical, sweeping statements were made by the Muslim scholars, and nobody would dare oppose them in the Muslim world itself, because then they would be liable to be persecuted and killed even. So in such atmosphere of false security and false pride, such statements are easy to be borne. It is no wonder why such statements are found in the medieval ages, in connection with the commentary of the Holy Quran. It is no fault of the Holy Quran. It is the fault, as the Holy Quran itself has explained it earlier in the same surah, that when people get distorted, ultimately they transfer their distortion to their books, either literally by changing words or in meaning by destroying the meaning of the verses. So this is a good example of what has been said before. They say, now because they believe the non-Muslims could not do a good deed, so they have to include Muslims in this, and only emphasize on the fact that because Muslims will also be rewarded to the full, and we know that the majority among them would have done good deeds overwhelmingly more than the crimes they would have committed. So in that case, how can God pay them in the full for both for the crimes and for the good deeds? So suggestions are made, very interesting. The one suggestion, and Imam Razi doesn't agree with this argument, so when I'm quoting him, I don't mean he believes in this. What he says is that this is what has happened to the world of Islam. People go on, treating the Holy Quran so cruelly. So one group says that first, or possibly, first they will be sent to heaven. And you know why? Because they believed in eternity of hell. So if they were first sent to heaven, hell, and then taken out of hell, and then sent to heaven, then hell would be not eternal. So it is a preconceived idea behind their minds that the moment we admit this, there will be no longer an eternal hell. So other scholars will start laughing at us, so you have proved yourself to be wrong. So caught in this mess, in this difficult situation, they suggested that all right, nothing is wrong, we can prove it that this can be done. First they will be sent to Jannat, and after they are paid to the full, rewarded fully of their good deeds, then they will be fully rewarded for their bad deeds by their relegation to the hell, and they will be shoved in there and forgotten about. And eternally from then on, they will go to hell. That means except for prophets, because they themselves believe also that only prophets are masoom. That is to say, they are above committing sins. All the rest of the holy categories do commit sins here and there. Not only this, they also believed in the medieval ages, and still the present day scholars are the followers of these medieval scholars. They believed that some prophets have also sinned, occasionally here and there. And like Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, who is repeatedly referred to as Siddiq al-Nabiya, most truthful prophet, very righteous. He also lied thrice in his lifetime. So if wufiyat kullu nafsin ma kasabat refers to complete recompensation, full payment of whatever one has done of evil and good, then according to these, they have found a solution for themselves. All those holy men and the prophets, including, would first be rewarded fully in the heaven, and then after that reward has been given and Allah has nothing more to pay to them, then they will be sent to hell. Na'uzubillah min zalik. So you see, this is what happens to any religion when you travel some distance from its sources. And every century adds more darkness and more ignorance. You know, these religions who were light are covered and sheathed with ignorance upon ignorance later on. But Imam Razi tells such people that, look here, you also believe, and you are forgetting this, that once somebody enters Jannah, he will never be taken out. So this is no solution then. Either you have to believe that the hell is not eternal, or if somebody is first sent to Jannat, that is heaven, paradise, then you also believe that whoever once is permitted to enter the heaven is never taken out from there. So how will God break his own promise and take them out of Jannah once they have been given entrance? Second proposition is that first they will be put into hell, and after they have served their period, served their term, then they will be sent to Jannah, and they believe that this is only the possible way out and nothing more, nothing less. But at the same time, they have to admit that hell is not eternal. You see, so they give in, and this is a better position anyway than the previous one. Imam Razi, perhaps, this is the opinion of Imam Razi himself, that this is a far better position, and this is what we wanted to prove throughout, that hell is not eternal. So, by such scholars taking this position, they themselves have proved and supported us in this. Moreover, he raises another question, that somebody who has lived a long life of sticking to the concept of unity of God and doing good deeds, if he drinks a little wine, a cup or two, how can we equate these two things? How can we believe in a God who punishes them eternally for a drop of wine and rewards them limitedly for the whole life of doing good deeds and preaching unity of God? So he rejects and waves it off as absurd. While at the same time, some Muslim scholars, like Hazrat Yahya bin Ma'az, have maintained that one moment of true belief in God is better than 70 years of denial of God. So, one moment of belief can nullify the crime of his denial of 70 years. Now, these sayings, these sweeping statements, should not be rejected sweepingly altogether because they have some meaning. Perhaps what they implied was that if somebody has lived for 70 years, but just before his death, God showed mercy on him and he repented and started believing in God, then it is not necessary for God to give him a life more than 70 years to balance his crimes and then to give added portion of life to do some goods to his credit. So Allah forgives such a man because the end is good and that is enough. So that is what perhaps such scholars meant. And this can be proved and supported by Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's statements very clearly, that sometimes a man has committed sins all his life, but in the end he started repenting and began to see light. Then Allah showed mercy on him and ignored his previous sinful life. So perhaps that is what was meant. Now, about the life of hell, whether it's eternal or transient, we have a very categorical statement of Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam telling us that a time would come to hell when it will be empty almost entirely, and only one person will be left in the hell. And he paints the picture of a large building as if, which is empty and the wind blows from this side and that side and you hear the knocking of the doors and there's nobody to look after it. And it's all hollow and empty and deserted. And only one last person is left therein. So Allah will show mercy on him as well at last. And he will request to Allah that, oh my God, if you don't want to send me to heaven, please let me have a view of the heaven. So he will crawl out of the hell at last, and the hell would be left empty forever, and he will be permitted to go to the vicinity of the heaven. And then the tradition tells us Bill goes on building the whole episode by telling that then he would say, oh, for a waft of air from the heaven, please. So he would, a window would be opened and he would receive the cooling breath of heaven. And then say, oh, what a beautiful heaven you have created. Could I have a look, and that sort of thing. It is a very interesting way of telling how Allah is merciful on His people and how He Himself teaches them the art of praying. when he has decided to forgive them anyway. So ultimately he would say, could I just step in for a while? And Allah would say, come on, let's join the people, dwellers of heaven, and so on. So in view of all this, how can a sane man, unless he's unawares, maybe some of them are good scholars, at that time the traditions were not collected all together and not made available to them as they are available to us today. So if they were, I'm quite certain, if they were aware of such a tradition, and they were sane men, of course, then they could not have ever attributed such a thing to the Quranic teaching as they have, unfortunately. Now, I opined that this verse initially applies to the events of this world. In view of this, the meaning of this verse would be كَيْفَ إِذَا جَمَعْنَاهُمْ لِيَوْمٍ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. Yom is a very tricky word which should be translated with caution. Where it is translated as a day into English, then people are misled as to the true meaning of the word day, Yom. Yom, as I have already established, is a word which applies to sometimes very large period of time, extending into eons. So, just a period of time or an age. Age is a very good translation of the word Yom. So, for كَيْفَ إِذَا جَمَعْنَاهُمْ لِيَوْمٍ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. How would they find themselves when they face that age, that era, which has been promised, that at the end Islam is going to be conquered and all the religions will be brought together and they will get involved in a very grim battle of life and death. And then there is no doubt, وُفِّيَتْ كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ, that in such an age, that will be the age of reckoning here. Now this age of reckoning would be an age where kingdoms would change hands, where new geographies would appear, where the downtrodden people would be raised to high positions, and those who were despots previously, who trod upon Allah's servants, they would be relegated to lower and subservient positions and so on. This is what is meant here in reference to that age, and that is what is not going to happen in the hereafter exactly like this. Because there the mulk, the sovereignty will return entirely to God, and no one would be made sovereign. But here, on this earth, sovereignties change hands under Allah's guide, Allah's decrees. So the following verse exactly speaks of such an event that explains this verse further and says, قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ تُؤْتِي الْمُلْكَ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتَنْزِعُ الْمُلْكَ مِمَّنْ تَشَاءُ. For that age which we have mentioned, to get yourself prepared. The Holy Prophet of Islam is told that you should pray to God so that on that day, that age, that is to say, Islam does become victorious and the wrongs committed against the Muslims are righted at that time. And he is addressed as saying, Allahumma Malik al-Mulke, O our Lord, who is the sovereign, to whom belongs the sovereignty. Malik al-Mulk is a repetition of the word mulk, which means the possessor of sovereignty, the ultimate sovereign, the sovereign of sovereigns, that sort of expression. Totil mulka man tashao. You hand over sovereignty to whomsoever you please. And tanzeul mulka mimman tasha. and snatch away sovereignty from whomsoever you please. Now, this is not going to happen on the Day of Judgment, because about the Day of Judgment, the Holy Quran says, وَلِلَّهِ الْمُلْكِ. The mulk would belong only to Allah. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا يَوْمُ الدِّينِ يَوْمَ لَا تَمْلِكُ نَفْسٌ لِنَفْسٍ شَيْئًا وَالْأَمْرُ يَوْمَئِذٍ لِلَّهِ. And what can tell you, what can explain to you what the Day of Judgment would be? That day when all the propriety would return to God and every other soul will be totally dispossessed of everything. All possession, all milkiyat, all sovereignty would return to God, and He would be the only God, only being, only supreme being, which will have any power, and the rest will be totally disinvested of everything which Allah had given them earlier. So that is the day of reckoning, which is so awe-inspiring. But this verse so naturally does not speak of that day. Because what it says is some people would be made sovereigns, and sovereignty would start changing hands under Allah's decree, and those big empires about whom people think they are going to be, to rule the rest of the world eternally. And there is absolutely no way out. The Holy Quran speaks, no, there is. It's a promised day. And wufiyat kullu, now let me say, Jamanahum li-yawmin means the world would be brought together as one entity. And this is what has already happened here. Now, the distances have shriveled and contracted to a degree that if you look back in time, you'll be surprised to find that countries much closer to each other, even sometimes bordering upon each other, appear to be so far away that the majority of people living in one country had not even dreamed of crossing over the border. There was a time, and there were such times in various periods of history, where the distances enlarged because of distances between the people and the possibilities and the means of travel available to them. So it would be a very rare entrepreneur who would take the courage of going across to the other worlds, and then he was applauded. And the journeys which have been recorded in history tell us of people who, had the courage to go across and begin to see the world, spending sometimes 16 years from Europe to China and back. And sometimes some world-famous travelers took about 32 years of their life to travel the world and then return and report things or wonders which they had witnessed across. And now it's only a matter of hours. One can go round and round and round. So that is the meaning of Jamana. Will bring the whole mankind together, and the punishment of one will be witnessed, and that witnessing would be shared by everybody through satellites and whatnot. If some wrath of Allah overtakes one country and one people, the next morning the entire world knows what has happened there. Even a small news of sabotage somewhere in the country is next morning flashed in the entire world. So that is the meaning of Jamanahum. So a kind of reckoning, day of reckoning has already been ushered. We are passing through that. And that is what has been promised, the age of reckoning. And it is not just one day, it is a long period of time, maybe extending to 100 years or so. But it has already started, and it is going to end up the way the Holy Quran promises us. وَوُفِّيَتْ كُلُّ نَفْسٍ مَا كَسَبَتْ وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. This is one thing which unfortunately was forgotten about by some of the earlier commentators, that if you believe in eternal hell, how could Allah say, La yuzlamoon, and they will not be wronged? No injustice would be committed to them. So whenever a day of reckoning is mentioned in the Holy Quran, around it, or at the end of the same verse, you will find this subject discussed, that Allah is not a transgressor, Allah is not cruel, Allah does not punish anybody beyond what he has earned. So it says the punishment would be severe, no doubt, but the crimes would be so severe that they would, their crimes would justify the punishment. So now if we are actually in for a global war, an atomic war, imagine how much crime has been committed in the world, so that Allah has ultimately decided us to punish at such vast scale and to such intense degree. And that is exactly what has happened and what the people of this age have demanded. You know, a few years ago, or maybe 40, 50 years ago, I don't exactly remember when it was said by someone, that the crimes committed by the dwelling of Lot, two dwellings which were punished, Gomorrah and some other one, Sodom and Gomorrah, they were so small and insignificant as compared to the crimes we are permitted to commit now, today, in every city of the world, that if we are not punished, the people of Gomorrah and Sodom would hold God by the collar, that is what he says, and say, is this the sense of justice you have? You wiped us out from the face of earth for committing that crime. And you permitted thousands times more people in thousand times more larger areas and countries of the world to go on committing those crimes as if they were the sovereigns of this earth and there was nobody to bring them to books, and you never punished them, never destroyed them. So if atomic devastation and Holocaust is going to take place, then it has to take place because of all that man has earned. And I believe it will take place because then that logic, although it is very crudely expressed, has some substance in it. So large areas of the earth are going to be wiped out of human population, and collectively so. This also opens a window for us into peeping into the past, what might have happened at that time. You know, the remoter the past is, the shorter it appears, the time which we discuss in a remote past. Even in your own lives, when you look back at your childhood, it seems to have passed like this. While when you are going through that time, then it appears to be a large time. So when the Holy Quran or other scriptures discuss things of the past, they can't dwell upon such criminal conduct of that time as it has been mentioned to such a large degree that large portion of the book is devoted only to Gomorrah and Sodom, etc., and how long they were permitted and how long Allah tolerated. So they are just mentioned in passing, and we think that here they committed crime and there they were punished. It does not happen like this. They were also given a very large period of time to go on committing crimes until they had reached their teether's end. They had reached the maximum capacity of commitment of crime. So Allah was not unjust to them and is not unfairly fair to us. So our time would also come. It all depends on our capacity to commit crime. When that capacity is reached, then whoever the people are, whenever the people are, they are punished alike and treated in the same manner. So this verse, La yuzlamoon, although it seems to mitigate or give the impression of mitigation of punishment, but it's not so. What it points out is that your crimes are so large, so big, and so enormous that a God who never shows cruelty to anybody, if He has decided to wipe you out, then imagine what we have been doing. So it is the enormity of crime which has been pointed out under the expression وَهُمْ لَا يُظْلَمُونَ. Despite the fact that Allah is not cruel, yet He is punishing them, so imagine how much criminal they would have become at that time. No, I'm sorry, this time is over.